On Sundays, millions watched heroes collide under bright lights. What they didn't see was the quiet preparation behind the scenes. The silent agreements made in locker rooms before kickoff. Pain was expected, but stopping was never an option. The NFL sold toughness as virtue, endurance as destiny. From the first snap, bodies absorbed violence at unnatural speeds. Bones rattled, muscles tore, ligaments screamed. And yet the game demanded smiles, celebration, dominance. In that world, pain was not a warning. It was an inconvenience to be managed. Doctors didn't ask how much it hurt. They asked if the player could still perform. A needle, a pill, a nod of approval. The system moved fast, efficient, rehearsed. Every week repeated the same ritual. Pain arrived. Pain was silenced. Pain was postponed. And players learned quickly that honesty was dangerous. Admitting pain meant losing snaps. Losing snaps meant losing leverage. And leverage was survival. So they swallowed what they were given. Trusting white coats more than their own instincts. Trusting a league that promised protection. But protection was never the goal. Availability was. The league didn't need healthy players. It needed playable ones. And there was a difference no one talked about. As long as bodies kept moving, as long as helmets kept colliding, the business stayed alive. Painkillers became invisible teammates. Always present. Never questioned. They dulled the edges of reality. They blurred consequences. They allowed the impossible to continue. And slowly, quietly, dependency took root. Not as a mistake, but as part of the system. A system built to endure pain, not to heal it. Before we go any further, understand this. This story isn't about one player, one team, or one mistake. It's about a system. And if you want more documentaries exposing the hidden side of the NFL, make sure you subscribe now. This channel exists to tell the stories the league would rather you forget. White heavy checkmark inside NFL facilities. Medication flowed with routine precision. Small cups, unlabeled bottles, casual distribution. No dramatic warnings. No long-term conversations. Just quiet instructions to take this before warm-ups. Toradol became a familiar name. So did opioids, anti-inflammatories, muscle relaxants. The combinations changed, but the purpose stayed the same. Get through the game. Get through the week. Get to Sunday. Players compared dosages like strategies. Shared pills like veterans sharing survival tips. Some laughed it off. Others felt uneasy but stayed silent. Silence was rewarded. Questions were not. Medical records were vague. Pain assessments were rushed. Long-term damage was abstract. Short-term performance was concrete. The culture normalized chemical dependence. If you needed help to sleep, it was fine. If you needed help to wake up, it was fine. If you needed help to feel nothing at all, that was fine too. What mattered was productivity. What mattered was staying on the field. The league framed it as care. But care requires restraint. Care requires limits. This system had none. Team doctors were caught in the middle. Employed by organizations, not players. Measured by availability reports, not recovery timelines. A player cleared to play was success. A player sidelined was a liability. And slowly, medicine became strategy. Treatment became negotiation. Ethics became optional. Because in the NFL, Sunday always wins. No matter what it costs on Monday. White heavy check mark what no one prepared players for. Was how quickly relief could become dependence. The body adapted faster than anyone expected. Dosages that once worked stopped working. Pain returned sharper, louder, more demanding. So the prescriptions escalated. Stronger pills. More frequent doses. Less oversight. Players didn't see addiction coming. They saw survival. They saw a way to stay relevant. They saw a way to protect their families. Contracts were short. Careers were fragile. Injuries erased names overnight. Fear lived in every locker room. Fear of being replaced. Fear of being forgotten. Fear of honesty. Painkillers didn't just numb injuries. They numbed fear. They numbed doubt. They numbed consequence. But they also numbed judgment. Players trained through damage they couldn't feel, tore structures they didn't sense, compounded injuries silently. And when the pills wore off, the body collapsed under accumulated trauma. Some couldn't walk without medication. Some couldn't sleep without it. Some couldn't feel normal at all. But the league never asked why. It only asked if they were ready. Medical checklists replaced conversations. Clearance replaced care. And dependency tightened its grip. Not as an anomaly, but as an expectation. Because pain was inevitable. And the league had already chosen how it would be handled. White heavy checkmark behind closed doors, the league projected responsibility. Public statements spoke of player safety and wellness. Committees were formed. Protocols were announced. But inside facilities, nothing truly changed. Pain management remained aggressive. Return timelines remained rushed. The pressure remained constant. Players felt it in meetings. Felt it in subtle comments. Felt it in reduced reps. The message was never explicit, but it was always clear. Availability defined value. Injury defined weakness. And pain was something to overcome, not address. Some players tried to resist. They asked for alternatives. They asked for rest. They asked questions. Those players noticed the shift immediately. Less trust. Less patience. Less opportunity. Depth charts do not lie. The league rarely punished resistance. It simply replaced it. Younger bodies waited eagerly, desperate for their chance, willing to accept the same risks. The system didn't need consent. It only needed silence. And silence was easy to maintain. Because pain is invisible. Addiction is private. And careers end quickly. When players disappeared from rosters, their stories disappeared too. No press conferences. No investigations. Just quiet exits. And the machine kept moving. Sunday after Sunday. Leaving broken bodies behind. Without ever slowing down. White heavy checkmark, the lawsuits didn't begin with outrage. They began with desperation. Former players struggling to function. Struggling to remember. Struggling to live without medication. They described locker rooms that felt like pharmacies. Described doctors who handed out pills casually. Described pain treated as an obstacle. Not a condition. Not a warning. Depositions revealed patterns. Consistent practices across teams. Consistent expectations across seasons. This wasn't one bad doctor. It wasn't one careless franchise. It was systemic. Players testified about taking multiple medications simultaneously. Often without knowing what they were. Often without understanding interactions. Some said they trusted the process blindly. Others admitted they were scared to ask. Medical consent became a formality. Informed consent was rare. The league responded with denial. With legal defenses. With technical language. Responsibility was fragmented. Teams blamed doctors. Doctors cited league culture. The league cited individual choice. And accountability vanished in the gaps. Settlements followed quietly. No admissions. No reforms with teeth. Public attention faded quickly. Because complex harm doesn't sell like violence on the field. And the spectacle continued. Uninterrupted. Unquestioned. Protected by contracts. Lawyers. And collective silence. If this story is changing the way you see the NFL, pause for a second. Like this video. It tells the algorithm that these stories matter. And comment below. Should the league be held accountable for what happened to its players, or is this just the cost of the game? White heavy check mark. What makes the system dangerous is how reasonable it appears from the outside. Football is violent. Injuries are expected. Treatment seems necessary. But necessity becomes abuse. When limits disappear. Painkillers were never meant to be solutions. They were meant to be temporary tools. In the NFL, they became infrastructure. built into preparation, built into recovery, built into survival. Young players entered the league unprepared. No education on dependency. No warning about long-term consequences. Just trust. Trust in doctors. Trust in organizations. Trust in a league that marketed family values. But trust without transparency is dangerous, especially when power is uneven. A rookie questioning medical advice risks everything. A veteran refusing treatment risks replacement. So compliance became instinctive, automatic, reinforced by culture, reinforced by contracts, reinforced by fear. The NFL never forced pills into mouths. It never had to. The incentives were enough. Play hurt, or don't play at all. And for many, that choice was no choice. It was surrender, not to addiction, but to a system that never planned to protect them. White heavy checkmark retirement was supposed to bring relief. Instead, it exposed everything that had been delayed. Pain returned without structure, without schedules, without medical access. Bodies that had been chemically managed for years suddenly had nothing to lean on. Some players experienced withdrawal without knowing its name. Mood swings, insomnia, anxiety, unrelenting discomfort. They weren't warned this would happen. No exit briefings. No tapering plans. No long-term support. The league's responsibility ended with the contract. The body, however, didn't recognize retirement. Injuries accumulated in silence now demanded attention. Daily tasks became negotiations with pain. Walking, sleeping, holding a child. Without team doctors, former players turned to personal physicians. Many continued prescriptions just to function. Others were cut off abruptly. Both paths carried consequences. Addiction didn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it looked like survival, like normalcy, like holding life together. Public narratives rarely matched private reality. Fans saw former stars smiling at events. They didn't see the medication schedules. They didn't see the tremors. They didn't see the fear of running out. And the league stayed distant. White heavy checkmark. As years passed, the league refined its language. Words like care and support became common. Policies were announced. Panels were formed. Statements were issued. But the lived reality changed slowly, if at all. Pain was still negotiated weekly. Medical decisions were still influenced by stakes. And players still felt pressure to comply. The system learned how to protect itself better. Legal teams tightened protocols. Documentation improved. Liability became managed. But prevention remained secondary. Because prevention requires restraint. And restraint conflicts with spectacle. The NFL mastered distance. Distance from consequence. Distance from aftermath. Distance from accountability. Former players became reminders the league preferred to forget. Their struggles framed as personal journeys, not institutional outcomes. But pain has memory. Bodies remember what organizations move past. And when enough stories align, denial becomes impossible. The question was never whether harm existed. It was how much harm was acceptable, and who was expected to absorb it. The answer, quietly, was always the same. The players. Always the players. Long after the stadium lights dimmed. Long after the cheers faded. Long after the league cashed its checks. White heavy checkmark for fans. This truth is uncomfortable. Football is tradition. Community. Identity. Questioning it feels like betrayal. But loving the game does not require ignoring its costs. It requires honesty. The painkiller crisis is not about villainy. It is about incentives, structures, silence. It is about a system that rewarded endurance without preparing for consequence. Players were not weak. They were conditioned. They were compliant because survival demanded it. Understanding that shifts responsibility upward, toward organizations, toward leadership, toward a league that benefited immensely. Real change would mean independent medical authority, strict limits, transparent data, and most importantly, a cultural shift away from glorifying sacrifice. Because pain masked is still pain, addiction managed is still addiction, and harm postponed is still harm. The league can evolve, but only if pressure comes from outside, from fans, from media, from voices unwilling to forget. Silence built this crisis. Only exposure can dismantle it. White heavy checkmark. The NFL's greatest strength has always been its ability to move forward. New seasons, new stars, new storylines. But forward motion should not erase responsibility. The painkiller crisis is not history. It is legacy. It lives in bodies that no longer take the field, in minds still negotiating pain daily, in families carrying invisible weight. These players gave everything they were asked to give, often more. What they received in return was conditional care, temporary relief, and long-term consequence. Acknowledging this does not diminish the game. It humanizes it. It forces reckoning. And reckoning is the first step toward reform. Because greatness built on silence is fragile, and a league that refuses to confront its shadows will always be haunted by them. The pain was never invisible. It was simply ignored, managed, deferred, until it could no longer be hidden. This is not an attack on football. It is a demand for honesty, for accountability, for change, because the game will survive. The question is whether the players truly will. The NFL will always move forward. New seasons, new stars, new headlines. But the damage doesn't disappear when the cameras turn off. If you believe these stories deserve to be told, subscribe to Dark Side of the NFL. Because the truth doesn't end when the game does.